Inside a medieval. Tonight you do not enter the Middle Ages through the gate of a castle. There is no trumpet from a tower, no polished armour, waiting in a torch-lit hall, and no king leaning over a map, as though the entire world might be moved by the weight of one jewelled finger. Instead, you arrive by a narrow track pressed into the earth by generations of feet, hooves, wooden wheels, and rain. The village lies quiet beneath a fading moon. Its houses are low shapes under steep roofs of thatch clustered near a church whose square tower is just beginning to separate itself from the darkness. Beyond the last cottages, open fields stretch toward a pale horizon, divided not by neat hedges but by long strips of cultivated ground. Somewhere farther away, an ox shifts in its enclosure. A dog gives one doubtful bark, decides that you are not worth the effort, and settles again. You stop before one of the smaller homes. It belongs to a family who works several scattered strips in the manor fields and keeps a garden behind the house. They are not the poorest people in the village, and they are certainly not rich. Their security depends on the harvest, the health of their animals, the demands of the Lord's steward, and the many ordinary accidents that can turn a manageable year into a desperate one. The house has no grand entrance. You bend beneath a wooden lintel, push through a rough door, and step into the darkness of a medieval peasant's home. Before you settle beside the embers, you may quietly leave a like, subscribe if these slow journeys through ordinary history help you rest and tell us where in the world you are listening from. Then let the room grow still around you and allow the village night to carry you backward. The first thing you notice is not what you see but what you smell. Wood smoke lingers in the rafters. Damp wool hangs near the wall. There is the earthy odour of a packed floor, the faint sharpness of onions stored in a basket, old straw leather ashes, and the warm animal scent carried in each time the door opens. None of these smells exists alone. They have lived together for years, settling into the timber and thatch until the house itself seems to breathe them. The family is still asleep, while the tenant who works the land lies beside his wife Alice on a broad sack filled with straw. Their blanket is wool-patched in several places and valuable enough to be mentioned in a will. Near them, their children, Thomas and Joan, sleep on a narrower mattress. Alice's widowed mother occupies a low bed closer to the hearth where the surviving warmth eases her joints. The arrangement is crowded, but crowding is ordinary. Privacy is created by darkness habit and the courtesy of not looking too closely. A hanging cloth or light wooden screen may divide one sleeping place from another in a more comfortable household, but here a chest and a suspended cloak form the nearest thing to a wall. You wait as your eyes adjust. The dwelling is more carefully made than the word cottage may suggest. Heavy timbers carry the roof. Between them woven rods have been packed with a mixture of clay, straw, dung, and hair, then smoothed to form walls that keep out most wind when they are maintained. In other regions, houses may be built from stone turf or thick cob. In this part of England, timber, wattle daub, and thatch are familiar materials drawn from the local landscape and renewed by local hands. The home is not permanent in the way a cathedral is permanent. It survives because someone is always repairing it. The roof descends low over the walls. Its layers of straw shed rain when they are tightly laid, although wind can lift loose sections, and birds occasionally discover that a roof is also an excellent place to search for nesting material. The steep angle encourages water to run away before it soaks deeply. Under the eaves, the thatch extends beyond the wall, protecting the door beneath. There is no gutter. Rain falls from the edge and cuts a soft trench around the dwelling. At the center of the room rests the hearth, a dark circle, on a slightly raised bed of clay and stone. No chimney rises above it. Smoke from the fire drifts upward into the high roof space and finds its way through the thatch, the eaves, and a small opening that can be uncovered when weather allows. This does not make the room constantly blind with smoke, but neither is the air clean. When damp fuel smoulders or the wind presses downward, smoke gathers beneath the rafters and lowers itself into the room. Eyes water, throats roughen, soot darkens the upper timbers so completely that they shine in places like blackened bone. Yet the smoke also has uses. It discourages insects in the thatch. It dries meat hung above the hearth. It coats the roof timbers with a preserving layer and curls around every basket beam and tool stored overhead. A modern visitor may hurry to escape it. The family beneath this roof accepts it as part of warmth, food, light, and shelter. Comfort rarely arrives alone in this world. It usually brings smoke, labor, mud, or expense with it. The room is not empty simply because it contains little furniture. Along one wall stands the family's great chest, secured with an iron lock. It stores linen, better clothing, documents, a few coins when there are coins to keep, and objects too precious to leave in open sight. A trestle board can become a table at meal times and be lifted away when floor space is needed. There are three-legged stools, useful because they do not wobble much on uneven ground, a bench, clay pots, wooden bowls, a small iron knife, baskets, sacks and pegs hammered into timber uprights. Nothing is present merely to fill a room. An object earns its place by being useful, repairable, or valuable. The packed earth floor is hard beneath your feet. It is not a meadow of fresh rushes, changed daily as romantic paintings sometimes suggest. A little straw may be scattered, where dampness collects, and old plant material may be swept out when it becomes foul, but cleanliness is always a negotiation with weather and workload. Mud enters on shoes, ash leaves the hearth, flour escapes the kneading board. A chicken occasionally ignores every human opinion about where a chicken ought to stand. Near the doorway, a small partition separates a space used for storage and, during severe weather, for a vulnerable animal. Many medieval rural houses are associated with people and livestock sharing a single roof, especially in longhouse traditions farther west and north. That does not mean every cow sleeps beside every family. Arrangements vary by region, wealth, and period. Here the family's pig occupies a pen outside unless cold, sickness, or danger makes shelter necessary. A hen with more confidence than judgment sometimes enters anyway. The eastern sky grows lighter. Through a shuttered opening a grey line appears. Glass is absent. In a wealthy townhouse or church, glazed windows can catch the light in coloured fragments, but in this cottage the window is a small opening closed by a wooden shutter. When it is open, daylight and fresh air enter together with cold flies and whatever rain the wind chooses to carry sideways. The church bell sounds before sunrise, its note moving over roofs and fields. Alice stirs first. She does not consult a clock. The household reads time through bells, daylight hunger habit, the position of the sun, and the long seasonal changes in the work itself. Winter mornings permit more darkness. Harvest mornings begin before the body feels ready. There is no single medieval schedule because July and January demand entirely different lives. Alice reaches toward the hearth. Beneath a soft covering of ash, a coal still holds a red heart. She bends close, adds dry grass and thin splinters, and blows until a thread of smoke rises. Then the ember brightens. A flame takes the edge of the kindling, small and uncertain at first, then steady. This modest success prevents the morning from beginning with a walk to a neighbour's house carrying a pot in which to borrow fire. One by one the sleepers wake. The cottage changes from a shelter of breathing bodies into a place of movement. Straw rustles. Feet search for shoes. Someone coughs in the smoke. The door opens and the cold blue air of dawn pours across the floor. For the family, this is not a performance of picturesque poverty. It is simply home, and the day has already begun. As the new flame spreads through the kindling, Will places thicker pieces of wood around it. Fuel has been gathered, cut, carried, dried, stacked, guarded from rain, and rationed according to the season. The fire may appear to be the quiet centre of the house, but it consumes hours of labour before it consumes a single branch. Rights to collect fallen wood can be limited by manorial custom. Cutting living timber without permission may bring a fine. Families gather brushwood, hedge trimmings, dead branches, and whatever else local rules and local landscapes provide. In regions where wood is scarce, people burn peat furze, straw, or dried dung. The scent of a medieval hearth, therefore, changes as the countryside changes. This morning the wood is dry enough to catch quickly. Alice suspends a pot from an iron hook above the fire. The hook is one of the more expensive pieces in the house, made by a smith and expected to last. By raising or lowering the pot, she controls the heat with more precision than the open flames might suggest. Cooking without a numbered dial does not mean cooking without skill. She knows where the pot simmers, where bread can bake beneath an upturned vessel covered in embers, how long peas must soften, and when a thin pottage needs more grain to satisfy several hungry people. Warmth gathers slowly. The fire heats the bodies near it, not the room evenly. Stand too far away, and the morning remains cold. Sit too close, and smoke turns. Sparks leap, and one side of your body grows hot, while the other stays chilled. The family wears clothing indoors because the house is not intended to become a sealed pocket of summer. In winter, wool, shared blankets, activity, and close sleeping are as important as fire. The hearth must also be watched. Thatch and flame are dangerous neighbours. A spark caught by a dry draught can travel upward, a pot can overturn, a child can stumble. Village rules sometimes regulate ovens, hearths, and the condition of chimneys in towns because fire can move from one building to the next faster than people can carry water. Here there is no chimney to clean, but soot and loose thatch still demand attention. The family keeps a large water vessel nearby, though everyone understands that a serious roof fire would likely outrun it. For now the fire behaves. Its light touches faces, pot rims, and the polished edge of a wooden spoon. Before sunrise and after sunset, light is precious. Candles made from beeswax burn more cleanly, but belong chiefly to churches, wealthy houses, and special occasions. A peasant family is more likely to use tallow candles when they can afford them, small oil lamps in suitable regions, or rushlights made by peeling a dried rush and drawing its pale inner pith through melted fat. A rushlight is humble, smoky, and brief. It can illuminate a task, but it does not turn night into day. This limitation shapes the household. Work requiring close vision is drawn toward the window during daylight or toward the hearth in the evening. Mending, carving, sorting seed, and checking a child's hair for lice all compete for the same circle of brightness. Shadows begin only a few feet away. The corners of the cottage never entirely reveal themselves after dark. The scarcity of artificial light does not mean the family becomes inactive at sunset. Winter evenings can be productive. Hands remember movements that eyes barely follow. A spindle turns, a net is repaired, a handle is smoothed, stories are told, prayers are said, and accounts are remembered by people who may never write them down. But expensive fuel and light encourage everyone to do certain work together, near the same flame within the same small portion of night. The pot begins to steam. Yesterday's pottage has thickened while standing cool. A little water loosens it, and Alice adds chopped leek and a handful of oats. Reheating a common dish is practical, and the hearth rarely produces the sharply divided sequence of breakfast, lunch, and dinner familiar to a modern household. Meals depend on labour, daylight season, status, and local custom. A substantial morning meal may wait until work has begun, while on other days a little bread and ale are taken before the fields. Will crouches near the door and examines a wooden pin from the plough harness. Its surface has split. He could discard it, but very little here is discarded, simply because it has become inconvenient. He trims the damaged end with a knife, tests the fit, and sets it beside the tools he will carry. Repair is not a separate hobby. It is a way of keeping the household alive. Pots are patched with metal staples. Cloth becomes children's clothing, then rags, then stuffing or tinder. Broken handles are replaced. Bones become needles, pins, gaming pieces, or toggles. Ash fertilizes the garden or helps in cleaning. Fat becomes food salve, soap, or light. The fire produces another useful substance: hot water. Alice warms only what the household needs because hauling water requires effort. No pipe runs through the wall. Every drop must arrive by bucket from the village well or another accepted source. Some medieval communities have excellent wells and carefully protected springs. It is too simple to imagine that everyone drinks ale because all water is poisonous. People recognize foul water by smell, color, taste, and experience even without understanding microbes. They drink water especially from good sources, but ale remains important because it is nourishing, familiar, socially valued, and often brewed at home. Joan carries a smaller vessel to the doorway where a basin waits. Alice pours in a little warm water. Faces and hands are washed. The washing is modest, yet it corrects another old myth. Medieval people do not reject cleanliness. They wash according to access, labor, season, custom, and means. Hands may be washed before eating. Feet are cleaned when mud becomes unbearable. Hair is combed, clothing aired, and bodies bathed in rivers, bathhouses, tubs, or basins when circumstances allow. Cleanliness is not modern, though modern plumbing makes it much easier. Soap exists made from fat and an alkaline solution such as lye, but it is not used in the same abundant way as a scented modern bar. Fine soaps can be traded products. Coarser household soap may clean textiles and equipment. Sand, ash, hot water scraping, scouring sunlight, and vigorous hands do much of the work. Will opens the shutter. Dawn enters as a broad grey presence, and smoke finds the opening with sudden enthusiasm. For a few moments the room becomes clearer. You can now see how each surface has been shaped by touch. The bench is pale where generations have sat. The spoon bowl is smooth. The chest lid bears cuts from objects placed upon it. The doorway has been worn by shoulders, baskets, sacks, and years. Outside, a neighbour is already walking toward the well. Another leads 2 oxen along the lane. The sound of the village rises gently. A pail against stone, a gate dragged open, geese announcing private outrage, an axe striking wood. Smoke lifts from several roofs, then flattens in the cold air. Alice feeds the fire once more, not extravagantly, but enough to keep the pot simmering while the family dresses. Warmth, light, cooked food, dry clothing, and hot water all gather around the same source. The hearth is dangerous, smoky, laborious, and indispensable. A castle may have several fireplaces, a bakehouse, kitchens, and servants assigned to fuel. This cottage has one circle of flame and the practiced attention of the people who depend upon it. The room brightens. Firelight yields slowly today. What had been hidden in shadow is now revealed in brown wool, pale linen, red clay, black iron, and the soft gold of straw. The household turns from warmth toward clothing, and from clothing toward the cold work waiting beyond the door. Getting dressed in this house is not a casual matter because clothing represents months of labor and a significant portion of household wealth. A modern wardrobe can contain garments forgotten after a season. Here, a wool tunic may be worn until it is faded, patched, cut down for someone smaller and finally reduced to pieces that no longer resemble clothing at all. The cloth begins long before the garment in a field of flax or on the back of a sheep and passes through washing, sorting, combing, spinning, weaving, fulling, cutting, and sewing. Every rip threatens stored labor. Will pulls a linen shirt over his head. Linen against the skin can be washed more easily than heavy wool and helps protect outer garments from sweat and dirt. Over it comes a wool tunic belted at the waist, then separate hose secured beneath. His clothing is not colorless sackcloth. Even ordinary people may wear browns, greens, muted reds, yellows and blues depending on available dyes, quality local rules and expense. Age, sunlight, repeated washing and repairs soften the colors. The result is less a world without color than a world in which color carries labor. Alice wears a linen shift beneath a wool gown. She covers her hair with a simple cloth. Her clothing must permit bending over the hearth, carrying water, working in the garden, spinning, helping in the fields, and performing the countless movements by which the household continues. The idea that medieval peasant women remain indoors while men alone perform useful labor would seem ridiculous here. Work is divided by custom, strength, skill, age, pregnancy, opportunity, and necessity, but survival allows little room for decorative idleness. Thomas struggles with a fastening, and his grandmother fixes it with fingers that have repaired clothing for half a century. Joan wears a garment altered from one that once belonged to her brother. The old seam line remains visible. Children's clothing is not always a miniature theatrical costume. It is practical, inherited, adjusted, and frequently dirtied. Shoes wait near the door. They are made of leather turned during construction so that the seams sit inward and softened by use. Their soles are thin compared with modern footwear. Mudstones, frost, and stubble can all be felt through them. Wooden patterns may raise better shoes above filthy streets in towns, but for ordinary field work, the family accepts mud as a condition rather than a surprise. Shoes are repaired when possible. In warm weather and suitable work, children may go barefoot, saving leather at the expense of comfort. Before covering her hair, Alice draws a comb through it. Combs of wood, horn, or bone are common personal tools. Grooming removes tangles and reveals lice, which are then picked out with close attention. Lice and fleas do not prove that people enjoy filth. They prove that parasites thrive in crowded homes, straw bedding, wool clothing, and a world without modern insecticides or washing machines. Bedding is aired when the weather is dry. Clothes are shaken, brushed, washed, and exposed to sunlight. Herbs may be scattered for their scent or reputation. None of this guarantees victory. Will washes his hands and splashes his face. He scrapes his teeth with a cloth and chews a small twig. Dental care varies widely, but people notice pain odor and damaged teeth. Diet can spare some villagers the constant refined sugar of later centuries, yet grit in flour wears enamel infections spread, and a broken tooth can become a serious danger. A local healer barber or confident neighbor may attempt extraction. This morning, no one has toothache. Take a quiet blessing worthy of more gratitude than it receives. The family does not own a mirror of bright, modern glass. A small, polished metal surface can give a dim reflection, and still water can do the same. Appearance is judged largely through other people. Alice smooths Joan's hair because untidiness can be read as neglect. Will checks the tear repaired at his elbow. Clothing communicates condition, occupation, respectability, and sometimes status before anyone speaks. Sumptuary laws may try to reserve certain fabrics, furs, ornaments, or colors for particular ranks, especially later in the Middle Ages. Enforcement is uneven, and village clothing is shaped more immediately by cost and availability. Fine silk remains a distant luxury. Good broadcloth, however, is known and desired. A better cloak may be saved for church, court day, a wedding, or market. The family's ordinary garments are rougher but not shapeless. They are cut by people who understand bodies and movement. Alice inspects a damp patch on Thomas's sleeve. The garment must be dried near the hearth, but not so close that a spark catches it. Wet wool is heavy and slow to dry. In winter this matters. A day of rain can soak a cloak, chill the body, and leave the household steaming around the fire that evening. Spare garments are limited. Staying dry is not simply a preference, it is a form of protection. The family's grandmother wraps a woolen cloth around her shoulders. Older bodies, injured bodies, pregnant bodies, and very young bodies experience the cottage differently. A healthy adult can answer cold with work. An aching joint cannot always do so. Care happens inside the same room as cooking and repair. There is no separate bedroom to which weakness politely withdraws. As everyone dresses, the cottage becomes crowded with small decisions. Which cloak is dry enough? Can the torn shoe survive another walk? Is the sky promising rain or merely threatening it? Should the children carry hoods? Clothing connects the body to weather, labor, reputation, and household economy. A missing mitten is not solved by ordering another. A ruined cloak can alter an entire winter. Alice opens the chest and removes a folded cloth. The chest smells faintly of wood and dried herbs. Inside lie the family's best linen, a narrow ribbon, 2 documents bearing marks and seals, and a purse with a few coins. Textiles fill much of the remaining space. In inventories, cloth and bedding are often among the most valuable possessions of ordinary households. They are portable wealth, warmth, display inheritance, and work made visible. She closes the lid and turns the key. The better things return to darkness. Today is not a feast day. No official is expected. No marriage procession will cross the lane. The family dresses for labor, and labor is already calling through the open door. Outside, frost touches the shaded grass. The sun has risen behind a layer of cloud, giving light without warmth. Will lifts a tool over his shoulder. Thomas takes the repaired harness pin. Alice ties a basket to her arm, and Joan carries a smaller one with grave importance. The family steps across the threshold one after another. For a moment you remain inside. The room is suddenly larger, though not empty. The pot continues to simmer. Smoke twists through a beam of daylight. On a peg hangs a damp cloak. Near the bed, a spindle waits for the hands that will return to it. The house holds the shape of the family even when they leave, just as their clothing holds the shape of their labor when they wear it out into the fields. You follow them into the yard, where the cold feels sharper after the smoky warmth. The cottage stands among several small buildings rather than alone. A shed patched with old boards, a wattle enclosure for poultry, and a low structure where tools and fodder can be kept. A narrow path leads toward the village water source. In wet weather, this path becomes a brown ribbon of mud. Today, the frost has given it a temporary crust. Alice carries the larger vessel, Thomas another. Fetching water is so ordinary that no chronicler would think to describe this particular journey. Yet, without it, the household stops. Water is needed for drinking, brewing, cooking, washing animals, gardens, and certain crafts. The source may be a spring, a well, a stream, or a carefully maintained conduit, depending on the village. This one has a shallow, stone-lined well near the green. Its wooden cover is imperfect but useful, and the villagers argue regularly about whose duty it is to repair the lifting frame. The familiar claim that medieval people never drink water because all water is deadly would puzzle Alice. She knows clear water from foul water. She knows that runoff after heavy rain can spoil a source, that a dead animal upstream is dangerous, and that stagnant water smells wrong. She does not know about bacteria, but observation has its own authority. Water is certainly capable of carrying illness, especially where waste and wells sit too close together. It is not, however, regarded as universal poison. Ale is important for other reasons. It provides calories, uses grain keeps for a limited time, and belongs to hospitality and wages, as well as thirst. The ordinary ale brewed in households is often weaker than festive drink and may be consumed by people of different ages, but water remains part of daily life. The truth is less dramatic, and therefore more human people drink what is available, customary, safe enough, and affordable. At the well, Alice greets a neighbour. Their conversation lasts only a few moments, but information moves through such meetings. A ewe has gone lame. The reeve may call for ditch work. A travelling seller was seen on the road. Someone's baby has a fever. The village possesses no newspaper, yet it is not uninformed. News is carried in buckets, baskets, church porches, alehouses, fields, and the spaces beside ovens. The full vessel is heavy. Alice balances it carefully for the walk home, using a cloth pad and practiced posture. Spilled water means walking back. Thomas hurries once hears the water slap against the sides and slows without being told. Joan gathers thin, fallen sticks along the hedge, converting a water journey into fuel gathering. No trip is permitted to have only one purpose when time and strength are limited. Back in the cottage, the morning meal waits close to the hearth. Breakfast is not always treated as a large formal meal. Its timing and importance vary with season status, labour and local custom. On a hard work day, the family needs something before the fields. On another day, adults may begin with only bread and drink. Today there is yesterday's coarse loaf, a little cheese ale and pottage warmed from the pot. The loaf is darker and denser than modern white bread. It may be made from a mixed crop, perhaps wheat and rye grown together as maslin with barley or other grain, entering poorer loaves. Grain choice depends on soil harvest market and household fortune. Fine white wheat bread exists and carries prestige, but this family does not eat it every morning. Their bread is valuable enough that crumbs are gathered rather than swept casually into the fire. Alice cuts the loaf with a household knife. Flour is never effortless. Grain must be harvested, threshed, winnowed, carried, and ground often at the Lauder's mill, where customary tenants may owe a fee. Millstones can introduce grit, and careful sifting costs time. Then flour must become dough, and dough must be baked perhaps in a communal or manorial oven where another payment may be required. A single slice therefore contains a field of mill fuel, skill, tolls and weather. The pottage is made from what the household can combine: peas or beans, leeks, onions, herbs, grain, perhaps cabbage, and occasionally some fat or a scrap of meat. It is not one fixed recipe. It is a method of turning available food into a warm meal. The pot may remain in use through much of the day, altered by additions rather than transformed into an eternal stew of legend. Food cannot be left safely forever. Alice recognizes sourness, mold, and decay, even if she cannot name the organisms responsible. Will dips bread into the pottage. Thomas eats quickly, because the older boy with the oxen has already passed the door. Joan is told to slow down. The grandmother takes the softest portion, not from ceremony, but because her teeth trouble her. The distribution of food reveals care and hierarchy at once. Will may receive a substantial share when heavy labour awaits, but children nursing mothers, the sick and the old also have needs the household cannot ignore. Salt is present in modest quantity. It must be bought or brought from producing regions, and its cost makes it worth watching. Cheese preserves part of the value of milk. Bacon, when there is any, preserves the pig through months in which fresh meat cannot be expected. Eggs appear when hens are laying, and when they are not more valuable for sale, rent, or hatching. The family diet is neither an endless banquet nor an unbroken bowl of grey misery. It rises and falls with the agricultural year. Late summer after harvest may bring relative plenty. Spring can be lean. A failed crop, animal disease, warfare, or abnormal rain can narrow every meal. Hunger is rarely theatrical at first. It begins with thinner pottage. smaller loaves, seed grain considered for eating, and parents quietly claiming that they are not hungry. The memory of such times shapes behavior even in a reasonable year. Alice stores, Will calculates. Nothing edible is wasted lightly. The meal ends without plates being carried to a separate kitchen. Wooden bowls are scraped, rinsed, and set near the wall. A horn cup passes from hand to hand. A cloth wipes the knife. The family makes the transition from eating to work in the same space where they dressed and slept. Before leaving, Alice measures grain into a small bag and checks the remaining loaf. These acts require no written ledger. She knows the stores by weight in her hands and depth in the chest. Household management is a form of arithmetic performed through memory, touch, and repetition. If the grain diminishes too quickly, the consequence will arrive weeks later. Outside, the village has fully awakened. Smoke rises from other roofs. A dog barks at a cart. Somewhere, a mallet strikes wood. The bell is silent now, but its earlier note seems to have released everyone into motion. Will and Thomas turn toward the strips of arable land beyond the houses. Alice and Joan remain for a moment in the yard, where another small world of work waits behind the cottage. The front of a peasant house faces neighbours' paths and obligations. The back faces survival in a more private form. Here lies the garden, though the word may suggest more leisure and order than the place provides. It is an intensely useful plot enclosed against hungry animals. Narrow beds hold leeks, onions, cabbages, beans, peas, and herbs chosen for flavour, medicine, scent, or reputation. Fruit trees may grow nearby if the site and household fortune allow. Every corner is expected to contribute. Alice examines the fence first. A gap has opened beneath one hurdle. A pig could enlarge it quickly, and a pig inside the garden is an efficient disaster. She pushes a stake deeper and weaves a pliant branch through the opening. Fences consume astonishing effort. Hedges must be laid, hurdles repaired, gates watched, and boundaries remembered. Much rural conflict begins not with kings, but with animals crossing a line. The family's pig roots in its enclosure. Dissatisfied with the arrangement, pigs turn scraps, mast, and forage into valuable meat and fat, but they also escape raid bite and attract complaints. In some communities, they are driven into woodland to feed on acorns and beech mast under regulated rites. Pannage, like gathering wood or grazing animals on common land, may require payment or depend on custom. The landscape is shared, but shared does not mean free from rules. Joan scatters a little feed for the hens. They come running with the solemn greed of small dinosaurs, though no one here would make that comparison. Their eggs are useful, their meat is useful, their droppings eventually return fertility to the soil. A foxhawk dog thief or simple illness can reduce the flock overnight. Keeping animals means living near unpredictability with feathers. The family may own a cow or a share. In one, depending on its means, it may keep a goat in another region, it may rely on neighbours and customary grazing. Livestock ownership is one of the important lines between households that appear similar from the road. A family with enough animals gains milk, manure, traction, wool offspring, and saleable wealth. It also carries more risk, needs fodder, and owes more daily care. A dead cow is not merely sad, it is an economic collapse with horns. You notice that the pig does not sleep beside the family's bed. Some medieval rural buildings do combine human and animal spaces beneath one roof, sometimes separated by a partition or passage. Others place animals in separate structures. Practices vary by region, period, wealth, and local building tradition. The image of every peasant sharing a single filthy room with cattle is too simple. Here, proximity remains close enough for sound and smell, but a wall and several paces separate the household from the pig. Alice and Joan collect manure and spoiled bedding for the heap. This is no meaningless dirt pile. Nutrients must be carried back to the fields and gardens if the soil is to continue giving. Street sweepings, animal dung ash, and organic waste acquire value when fertility is scarce. People quarrel over manure because people quarrel over things that matter. Near the wall, herbs grow, where warmth from the cottage gives a little protection. Sage, parsley, mint, and other plants may enter food or remedies. Their exact use depends on what Alice learned from her mother neighbours and experience. Written herbals exist, but most household knowledge moves through demonstration. A child watches how much leaf is crushed when a root is dug, which plant eases a cough, and which similar-looking plant must not be touched. Such knowledge is neither pure superstition nor modern pharmacy. Some remedies soothe, some contain compounds with real effects. Some do nothing, and some can harm. Alice does not divide them by those categories. She judges by inherited trust, observed results, availability, and the confidence of the person advising her. Prayer may accompany a poultice without appearing to compete with it. The physical and spiritual worlds are not kept in separate cupboards. Joan weeds around the onions. The task seems simple until you try to distinguish young crop from unwanted plant and remove one without disturbing the other. Children learn work through gradual participation. A very small child may scare birds, gather kindling, carry messages, mind geese, or watch an infant. By Joan's age, responsibility is not pretend. Yet childhood is not absent. She makes a face at the pig who races a hen for 3 steps, and keeps a strangely shaped stone in her pocket for no economic reason at all. Alice finds insect damage on a cabbage leaf. There is no perfect solution. She removes what she can and changes where she plants in later seasons, according to remembered practice. A drought will undo some plans, a wet summer will undo others. Garden success depends on labour, but never obeys labour completely. Beside the garden stands a small bake-related work area, though baking may occur elsewhere, under local custom. Nearby are bundles of dried plants, a broken basket waiting for repair, and a stack of pots turned mouth downward. Pottery is useful and fragile. A cracked vessel may be mended with metal staples by a specialist if valuable enough, or repurposed as a container, scoop, drain, or shard. Objects descend through usefulness rather than vanishing after their first failure. The yard also reveals smells the cottage walls had softened: damp straw, wood smoke, dung, earth, poultry, and the sharp, clean scent of frost. Medieval villages are not sanitary by modern standards, but waste is not simply abandoned everywhere without thought. Dung has value, ash has uses. Human waste may be collected, buried, spread under certain conditions, or deposited in pits and middens positioned with varying wisdom. Regulations exist in towns and customs exist in villages because people notice when filth becomes unbearable. Alice checks a covered vessel used for dairy work. Milk is highly perishable. It can become butter or cheese forms that travel further through time. Churning is repetitive labor, and cheese making demands attention to temperature, curd, drainage, salting, and storage. These skills are easily overlooked because they occur near home rather than beneath banners. Yet the ability to preserve milk can determine how much food remains in winter. In summer, the yard will be alive with flies. In winter, water will freeze in shallow containers. In spring, mud will climb every shoe. In autumn, the air may smell of apples, smoke, and slaughter. The house does not sit outside the seasons. Its roof walls, food pests, labor, and mood are all altered by them. Joan lifts the basket, now holding onions, a handful of herbs, and 2 eggs. The contents seem modest, but the household will use them all. Alice closes the hen enclosure, glances once more at the fence, and turns toward the common path. They are not finished at home. They are merely carrying the home outward in the form of labor that will support it. Beyond the last cottages, the village land opens into broad fields. The pattern appears irregular from the path: long, narrow strips, ridges, furrows, patches of stubble green winter grain, and fallow ground. No hedge encloses every holding. One family's land lies beside another's, scattered rather than gathered into a single neat farm. Will is already visible in the distance, small beneath a large grey sky. To understand the peasant home, you must walk beyond its walls. The cottage is built every day in the fields because nearly everything inside it depends on what happens here. Bread begins beneath these clouds. Straw for the roof begins here. Fodder, rent, seed, ale, bedding, and the ability to survive winter all pass through this soil. Will's holding consists of strips distributed through the open fields. This scattering can give access to different soils and spread risk, though it makes work and movement less convenient. The village organizes cropping through a shared system. One field may carry winter grain, another spring crops, another rest as fallow, with enormous local variation. Decisions cannot be entirely individual when animals, plows paths, and harvest schedules cross many holdings. The ridge and furrow surface rises beneath your feet. Repeated ploughing has built long ridges divided by drainage furrows. They are not decorative waves. Their shape records generations of teams turning soil in the same landscape. Some ridges are so old that no living villager remembers their beginning. Today, the work involves preparing ground and repairing drainage rather than harvest. Will shares access to a plough team. Few small tenants can casually maintain all the oxen equipment and manpower required for heavy ploughing alone. Cooperation may be customary, rented, exchanged, or owed. Oxen move slowly, but they pull steadily and can survive on rougher fodder than horses. Horses can work faster, but demand different investment. Medieval agriculture contains both according to place and purse. The plough itself is an expensive assembly of wood and iron. Its cutting edge wears, its beam can crack. Its harness must fit. Thomas is proud to carry the repaired pin because a small component can halt a large task. The village blacksmith's work travels invisibly through the field in every iron edge, nail shoe, hinge, and fitting. Will calls to the team. The animals know the work better than you do. The plough bites lifting dark soil and exposing roots, worms, and stones. Guiding it requires strength and constant adjustment. A straight furrow is an achievement. At the end of the strip, the team must turn, and every turn consumes time. The day is measured less by a clock than by light bells, hunger weather, and the length of ground completed. Alice joins other villagers clearing a ditch where winter rain has brought silt and leaves. This may serve the household strips, or it may be communal labour or labour owed to the manor. The same motion can belong to different obligations. A person digging for his own crop works under one pressure, digging on the Lord's domain while his own field waits creates another. The label peasant covers many lives. One villager may be a relatively prosperous free tenant with livestock and hired help. Another may hold a small cottage and depend heavily on wages. A customary or unfree tenant may owe labour services, fees, and restrictions tied to the manor. A landless worker may move between seasonal tasks. Medieval rural society has hierarchy all the way down, and the people within it understand the distinctions precisely. Will occupies neither the bottom nor the top. He holds enough land to give his family a stake in the village, but not enough to make a poor harvest unimportant. He owes rent and customary duties. He appears in the manor court. He exchanges labour with neighbours and sometimes hires himself out. His freedom is real in some directions and bounded in others. Thomas begins clearing stones. Some are carried to a boundary or used in repair. Children move through a ladder of tasks as their bodies grow. A boy may learn ploughing, animal care, reaping, carting, and craft skills. A girl may learn brewing, dairying, cooking, textile work, gardening, and harvesting. These patterns exist, but no household facing urgent work refuses a useful pair of hands merely because a textbook centuries later wants clean categories. By mid-morning the cold has retreated. Wet earth clings to shoes, shoulders warm under wool. The family pauses briefly for bread and drink carried from home. There is no long lunch hour announced by a mechanism. Rest arrives when animals need breathing, when a bell sounds, when weather interrupts, or when the body insists. Across another strip, a neighbour uses a spade. Further away, sheep graze ground permitted for the season. Common rights can include pasture wood turf or gleaning, each governed by local rules. The word common does not mean that anyone may take anything at any time. It means a community of entitled users shares resources through remembered custom negotiation and enforcement. An outsider cutting timber without right is a thief. A widow gathering fallen branches by custom may be doing exactly what the village accepts. The fields contain borders that are invisible to you, but obvious to those who work them. A balk of unploughed ground, a stone, a tree, a ridge, or collective memory marks where one strip ends. Moving that boundary is an old temptation. The manor court hears accusations about encroachment because a few stolen inches repeated along a furrow become real grain. Weather watches everything. A bright morning can turn to rain that delays sowing. Too much rain rots seed. Too little prevents growth. Frost damages blossom. Wind flattens grain. The household may pray for suitable weather because there is no wall between climate and the cooking pot. Faith does not replace field knowledge. It surrounds the knowledge with meaning in a world where control remains limited. At harvest, this landscape will change character. Then nearly every capable person will be drawn into cutting, binding, gathering, carting, gleaning, and guarding the crop from rain. Work begins early and can continue until light fails. Harvest meals may be better, wages may rise, custom may permit poorer villagers to glean leftover ears after sheaves are removed. Celebration follows success because relief must be expressed somehow. But harvest is months away. Today there is only the repeated bite of iron, the sucking sound of mud, and the low commands given to oxen. History often remembers fields when an army crosses them. The villagers remember them by drainage, weeds, yields, and who failed to repair a fence. Near midday, the distant church bell carries over the open land. Its sound is thinned by wind, yet everyone hears it. Will straightens slowly. Alice rubs soil from her hands. Thomas looks toward the village where smoke from the cottage has become indistinguishable from every other roof. The home seems small from here. That smallness is misleading. It pulls all of this labor toward itself. Each furrow points back to the hearth. Every basket carried across the threshold is the field entering the house, and every hungry person leaving at dawn is the house returning to the field. When the bell fades, Alice turns back before Will does. This is not because her working day is shorter. It is because her work has changed location. The path returns her to the cottage with Joan beside her and soil drying across both pairs of hands. At the door, the morning pot still hangs above a low fire. The room seems to have waited, but a house does not maintain itself while its people are away. Alice adds fuel checks. The food hangs the damp cloth nearer the warmth and sets water where it can heat. None of these tasks is large enough to dominate a record. Together they decide whether the household is fed, clothed, clean enough, and ready for tomorrow. Medieval documents often notice villagers when rent is owed, land changes. Hands a fine is imposed or a dispute reaches court. They are less likely to count every hour spent kneading dough, nursing a child, mending a sleeve, or keeping milk from spoiling. The spindle waiting near the bed returns to her hand. Alice draws prepared fibre, twists it, and lets the weighted spindle turn. The motion looks quiet, but cloth consumes time in quantities that are difficult to imagine. Spinning can accompany watching children walking, visiting, or sitting near the hearth, which makes it easy for an outsider to mistake it for idleness. A few moments gathered across a day become thread. Thread gathered across months becomes cloth. The spinning wheel is known in parts of medieval Europe and becomes increasingly important, but the older drop spindle remains familiar and portable. Weaving may be done within some households or by a specialist with a loom. Fulling, dyeing, and finishing may involve still more hands. A peasant tunic is therefore linked to networks beyond the cottage, even when much of its labour happens here. Joan tries to spin and produces a thick, uneven length. Her grandmother laughs softly, takes it and shows where the fingers should pinch. Skill enters the body through repetition. Instructions are brief because the hand must learn what words cannot fully explain. The old woman is slower than Alice, but she notices mistakes sooner. Age has reduced her force and increased the value of her judgment. Their work is interrupted by a neighbour who asks to borrow a small measure of yeast or brewing residue. Borrowing binds the village through countless modest obligations. A pot-tool animal handful of salt hour of labour or place by an oven may be lent and later returned in another form. These exchanges create cooperation, memory, gratitude, resentment, and gossip. There is no romantic harmony. There is interdependence, which is stronger and less comfortable. Brewing is one of the household activities through which women can earn money and reputation. A good batch of ale may be sold locally. An unreliable measure or poor quality may attract complaints and regulation. In many English communities, officers test ale and courts fine brewers for breaking the assize. The fines can function as both control and recurring cost. Alice does not brew every day, but when she does grain water, fuel vessels, timing, and cleanliness must all come together. She also knows when market opportunities justify carrying eggs, thread, butter, or produce beyond the village. Cash is needed even where many obligations are paid through goods and labour. Metal for repairs, salt, certain cloth pottery mill fees, court fines, and rents draw the household toward money. Peasant families are not sealed outside commerce. They calculate constantly whether an item is worth consuming, storing, exchanging, or selling. Joan sweeps the floor with a bundle of twigs. Dust rises into the light. She pushes straw and small waste toward the door, then sprinkles a little clean material near the hearth. A fresh layer can improve the surface. An old layer must be removed. Rushes and straw are sometimes imagined as remaining untouched for generations, accumulating every dinner bone and dead animal in a fragrant archaeological disaster. Real households vary, but people who live close to vermin and rot recognize the need to clear what fouls their space. A chicken appears at the threshold. Joan blocks it with her broom. The chicken considers the moral implications, finds none, and tries the other side. The confrontation ends with flapping laughter and one lost feather. Small comedy survives because solemn hardship cannot occupy every breath. Before returning to the spindle, Alice inspects the roof from outside. A dark patch suggests damp. Thatch is durable when well made and well maintained, yet it requires attention. A missing bundle can admit rain, rain can damage rafters, bedding stored grain and walls. Repair may require help from a skilled thatcher and contributions of straw, reed rope and labour. Home ownership, where it exists in some sense, does not remove obligation. It creates an endless conversation with decay. By afternoon, Alice has moved between spinning, cooking, cleaning, animal care, child instruction, garden work, and planning tomorrow. The grandmother has sorted herbs, watched the fire, and told Joan a story while her fingers continued to mend. The boundaries between production care and companionship remain indistinct. All occur beside the same hearth. When Will returns later, he may see thread wound neatly, a patched sleeve, a fuller water vessel, and supper nearly ready. He will not have watched the hundreds of motions that produced them, neither will a tax collector. Yet if those motions stop for a week, the household begins to unravel. The most necessary work is often the work history counts least clearly. The pot above the fire holds an afternoon meal, but it also holds the year. Look closely, and every ingredient has a season. Dried peas carry last summer forward, an onion remembers the garden, salt speaks of roads and trade, a shaving of bacon, if added, recalls the autumn killing of a pig. Grain carries the previous harvest towards the next one. Cooking is the art of persuading different months to meet in one bowl. Spring is a season of green growth and dangerous emptiness. Stored grain is lower old vegetables, soften, and new crops are not yet ready. Cows give milk according to calving and feed. Hens lay more as light returns. Wild greens and herbs can supplement the diet, but the season celebrated by flowers may be remembered by households as the hungry gap. Hope and shortage grow together. Summer widens the range of food while increasing labor. Gardens produce milk as processed berries and fruits appear according to place, and fish may be available from rivers, ponds, coasts, or markets. Yet much of what grows cannot simply be eaten at once. It must be dried, salted, smoked, brewed, baked, pickled, in suitable liquids, or turned into forms that last. Preservation is a labor performed against a future absence. Harvest brings grain and relief if the weather has allowed both. New bread may taste like security. The family calculates seed for sowing, rent or tithe, owed grain for brewing, grain for sale, and grain for mouths. A pile that looks abundant diminishes as each claim is removed. Celebration at the end of harvest is not evidence that labor was easy. It is evidence that uncertainty has briefly loosened its hand. Autumn is also a season of choosing which animals can be fed through winter. Livestock that cannot be supported may be slaughtered. Fresh meat becomes more available for a time, then is salted or smoked where resources permit. Fat is precious for cooking, preservation, light, and other uses. Nothing about slaughter is abstract to the children who have fed the animal. Familiarity does not necessarily erase feeling, it places feeling beside necessity. Winter narrows the garden and lengthens the hours near the fire. Meals depend heavily on stores, grain, legumes preserved, dairy root, vegetables, onions, cabbage, apples, were kept successfully, and cured meat in households fortunate enough to have it. Spoilage is a constant thief. Mice enter sacks. Damp ruins grain. Salted food can still fail. Alice examines, smells, sorts, and removes contamination as soon as she notices it. The church calendar also enters the pot. Numerous fast days restrict meat for those expected to observe them, though practice, health status, region, and enforcement complicate the rule. Fish, therefore, has religious as well as economic importance. It may arrive fresh salted, dried, or smoked. For a family far from the sea, preserved fish connects a village meal to distant coasts and merchants. Feast days reverse the rhythm. A wedding, Saint's Day, Christmas celebration, Easter meal, or harvest gathering can bring better bread, meat pies, ale, spices in wealthier settings, music and food shared beyond the household. Peasant life includes pleasure. People dance, sing, flirt, tell stories, wager, compete, and overdrink. The idea that ordinary villagers possess no joy until modernity rescues them is another way of refusing to see them as complete human beings. Still, inequality is visible in food. The Lord's household consumes different quantities. Cut spices and varieties. A prosperous tenant may eat noticeably better than a cotter. During scarcity, market prices punish those who must buy grain. What sits in a bowl depends on land, wages, household size, access, rights, health, and luck. The phrase medieval diet hides as much as it reveals. Alice tastes the pottage and adds salt with care. Joan watches, then asks whether there will be an egg. There are two, but one may be traded and the other kept. Alice pauses, cracks one into the pot and stirs it through the meal so that no single bowl can claim it. The decision is small, affectionate, and economic all at once. Bread is set near the fire rather than directly upon the earth. The knife cuts again. Wooden spoons enter bowls. There are no forks at this ordinary table in the modern dining sense, though knives, spoons, fingers, and pieces of bread handle food efficiently. Manners exist. Hands are expected to be reasonably clean. Sharing a vessel does not mean absence of rules. It means the rules suit a different arrangement. As the family eats later, Will ask, "How much grain remains?" Alice will answer, without opening every container. Her mental calendar runs from sack to sack, Saint's Day to Saint's Day, sowing to harvest. The home is a storehouse of time. Beans dried from their pods, herbs hanging from beams, apples laid apart, cheese aging ale fermenting, and seed kept from hunger are all promises that one season has made to another. One of the documents in the locked chest concerns Will's holding. He cannot read its Latin, but he understands the obligations it represents. The cottage may feel like the centre of his private world, yet it stands within a manor parish and kingdom, each capable of reaching through the door. Rent may be owed in coin, produced labour, or some combination. Customary services can require ploughing, reaping, carting, ditching, or other work on the lord's land. Some duties are fixed, others become disputed. Over the centuries, many labour services are commuted into cash in many places, while elsewhere they remain active. There is no single arrangement shared by every medieval peasant. The lord is not necessarily present. An estate may belong to a noble monastery bishop institution or absentee landholder. Daily authority is exercised through officials, the steward, bailiff, reeve, hayward, and others whose roles vary. The reeve may himself be a villager placed in the uncomfortable position of organizing neighbors and accounting upward. Power often arrives wearing a familiar face. The manor court records transfers, inheritance, breaches of custom, damaged crops, unauthorized taking of wood animals found straying, ale offences, disputes, and debts. It can also give villagers a forum in which claims are witnessed and local customs stated. The court is an instrument of lordship, but villagers use it strategically. They bring complaints because recognition by the court can protect a right as well as impose a fine. If Will dies, the holding may pass according to local custom, perhaps with a payment such as Harriet owed to the lord. Marriage, inheritance, and movement can carry other fees for tenants of unfree status. The exact names and burdens differ. What matters inside the cottage is that family events are never entirely private. Death changes who sleeps by the hearth and who answers the manor's demand. The parish adds another claim. The tithe, ideally a tenth of certain produce, supports the church and clergy, though its collection and division can be contentious. Villagers may owe grain, lambs, wool, or other produce according to local practice. Smaller dues accompany particular rites or seasons. The church offers worship, burial, a calendar, community space, charity in some forms, and spiritual assurance. It also requires resources. Devotion and resentment can occupy the same person. Royal taxation reaches the village less regularly, but sometimes heavily. Wars that seem impossibly distant require coin-grain carts, animals, and men. A king's campaign becomes a smaller store at home. The family may know little of strategy, but it understands the collector's assessment. National history enters the cottage as subtraction. Will keeps a few coins in the chest because obligations cannot always be met with goodwill. Coin circulates through rural England more than the old image of pure barter suggests. At the same time, much exchange remains non-cash labour, repaid by labour grain, lent until harvest, grazing, shared food given at work, tools borrowed, and favors stored in memory. The economy is mixed because village life is mixed. Debt is common and not automatically shameful. It bridges seasons and emergencies. But debt can become a trap when harvest fails or illness removes a worker. A small loan secured against future grain may grow into the loss of land. Poor households often decline through ordinary misfortune rather than one spectacular catastrophe. This evening Will inspect the coins with Alice. She knows which hen can be sold, how much ale might be brewed, and whether a piece of cloth can wait another month. Decisions about lordship are therefore made beside decisions about shoes and salt. The political world does not hover above daily life. It is folded into it. For now the coins remain locked away. The chest is plain, but its key is significant. It contains the household's better textiles, papers, and small reserve the things most capable of becoming a future. When Alice wears the key at her belt, she carries responsibility as visibly as Will carries a field tool. Outside, the light has begun its slow decline. The workers will soon return with mud on their shoes and the manor's invisible claims still attached to every strip they leave behind. The cottage will receive them not as a refuge beyond power, but as the place where power is counted, endured, and answered. Before the family returns, the grandmother notices a draught touching her ankle. She knows its source without searching long. A thin crack has opened where dried daub has pulled away from the timber. The house is always becoming a ruin, and the household is always persuading it to wait. Joan helps mix a little earth, clay, chopped straw, and water into material for the repair. Exact recipes follow local soil and tradition. The mixture is pressed into the gap and smoothed with wet fingers. Once dry, it may blend into the wall, though every repair remains faintly visible. The surface records years of weather and hands. Wattle and daub walls are sometimes treated in imagination as temporary huts, scarcely deserving the word architecture. In skilled construction, they can be practical and durable, especially when protected by good foundations, generous eaves, and maintenance. Timber frames carry loads. In other districts, stone cob turf or different combinations make more sense. A peasant house belongs to its local materials because transporting bulk across bad roads is expensive. The roof demands the greatest vigilance. Thatch can shed rain effectively and insulate well, but damp birds, vermin wind, and sparks work against it. Smoke may discourage some insects and help preserve roof timbers while also darkening the interior and irritating lungs. An open hearth gives warmth and food at the cost of risk. Every advantage arrives with its companion problem. Will returns with a wooden handle split near the socket. He does not discard the tool. After eating, he may remove the iron head shape, a new handle, and secure it with a wedge. Woodworking knowledge is spread through ordinary households, even when specialists make the finest objects. A person who cannot improvise repairs must pay someone who can, and cash is rarely eager to leave the chest. Iron receives even greater care. Nails are collected from burned or collapsed structures. Hinges move from one chest to another. A broken blade goes to the smith, who may rework the metal. The value of an object lies partly in its material and partly in the skilled labor already invested in it. Nothing stamped from a factory arrives tomorrow in an identical box. Look around the cottage again. The chest may be the finest piece of furniture. Benches and stools provide seats. A trestle board can form a table and be moved aside. Pegs use vertical space. Baskets contain goods that do not require locked protection. Wooden bowls, ceramic pots, knives, a ladle, spindle, comb, blankets, sacks, and tools create the household's physical vocabulary. Possessions are fewer than in a modern home, but fewer does not mean emotionally empty. A spoon may have belonged to Alice's father. The better blanket may have entered the house with her marriage portion. The chest may be promised one day to Joan. Objects carry biography because they remain close for years. Privacy is managed rather than guaranteed. A cloth can divide part of the room. A bed curtain in a wealthier cottage blocks draughts as well as eyes. People turn their backs while someone washes or dresses. Children are sent outside. Married intimacy must fit around sleepers' sounds and shared assumptions of discretion. The absence of corridors does not eliminate shame or modesty. It requires social choreography. Security is equally practical. The door closes with a wooden bar or lock appropriate to the household's means. Shutters cover openings. Dogs announce movement. Neighbors notice strangers. Theft occurs and manor courts record it, but a village is difficult to enter invisibly. Reputation serves as both protection and prison. Fire presents the most terrifying danger. A spark in dry thatch can destroy one house and leap to another. Water ladders, hooks, and communal effort may be the only defense. Hearths are watched, embers banked, and children warned. Yet flame cannot be excluded. Without it there is no cooked food, warm room, useful light, or many essential crafts. The medieval home is organized around a controlled threat. Storms bring other dangers. Wind lifts thatch. Flood water enters low buildings. Snow weighs upon roofs. In years of exceptional cold, animals and people compete for stored fuel. Maintenance is therefore not a spring project, completed once. It is a daily habit of looking at the eaves wall latch, smoke damp patch, insect hole frayed rope and worn edge. Joan presses one final handful of daub into the crack. It bulges unevenly. Her grandmother smooths it, but leaves the smallest print visible. No one signs the wall. No builder's name will be recorded. Yet the house survives because generation after generation notices a draught and reaches for mud, straw, and water. The repaired wall may resist rain, but the human body offers fewer guarantees. Near the fire, the grandmother lowers herself carefully onto a stool. One knee has hurt for years. On damp days it announces weather before the sky does. Chronic pain is common enough to be ordinary and private enough to escape most records. Her knowledge of illness begins with observation. A fever feels hot, a wound reddens, swells, smells, and sometimes kills. Certain foods upset the stomach, rest helps some conditions. Warmth broth, honey herbs, washing, bandaging, drainage and isolation may be used according to circumstance. None requires knowledge of microbes to offer occasional benefit. Medieval learned medicine interprets bodies through inherited theories, especially balances of humours, qualities, environment, diet and regimen. University-trained physicians exist but are unlikely to visit this cottage. More accessible help may come from a local healer, midwife, barber, apothecary, in a town priest, experienced neighbour or family member. The boundaries between professional and domestic medicine are porous. Some treatment is helpful, some is neutral. Bloodletting or aggressive purging can weaken a person who needs strength. Herbal doses can be dangerous. Surgery carries grave risk from pain, bleeding, and infection. Yet, it would be unfair to imagine every healer as a fool. Practitioners can set bones, clean wounds, recognize patterns, deliver babies, extract teeth, and learn from failures. Their limits are enormous, but their attention is real. Pregnancy transforms the household long before birth. Alice has known several pregnancies. Not every child survived. Women continue much of their work while pregnant because tasks do not vanish. Near labor, female relatives and neighbors gather. A midwife brings experience, reassurance, and practical skill. Birth may end safely, or it may turn suddenly dangerous through obstructed labor, hemorrhage, infection, or weakness no one can correct. Childbirth is therefore both common and feared. Church teaching, protective objects, prayers, herbs, and ritual actions may surround it. These are not evidence that practical assistance is absent. When control is uncertain, people use every form of help their world recognizes. Infants face illness, poor nutrition, accidents, and infection. Baptism may happen quickly because spiritual and physical danger are understood to be near. Parents love children who may not live. High mortality does not create emotional indifference. It creates grief, repeated often enough to acquire customs, prayers, silences, and names given again. Children who survive become more resilient but not invulnerable. A cut foot can fester, a cough can deepen. Contaminated food or water can sweep through several houses. Epidemics arrive before villagers understand their path. In the early 14th century setting of this household, the catastrophe later called the Black Death has not yet transformed England, but famine and disease are already familiar threats. The future carries knowledge no one in this room possesses. Care falls heavily upon the household. A sick adult cannot work and also requires work from others. Someone brings water, cleans bedding, prepares soft food, keeps the fire, and sits through the night. Neighbors may assist, especially in crisis, because each knows the same need may one day cross another threshold. Charity, kinship, duty, affection, and expectation overlap. The parish priest may be called. Confession, prayer, communion, or extreme unction addresses the soul and comforts the community. A modern division between medicine and religion does not describe this room. The villagers seek bodily recovery while preparing for spiritual possibility. Hope can hold both at once. Death most often occurs at home. The body is washed and wrapped. Neighbors gather. Bells announce loss. Burial follows in consecrated ground, usually sooner than modern custom would expect. Possessions are redistributed, debts named obligations transferred. The sleeper's place beside the hearth becomes empty, then is eventually occupied by someone else, because space and life continue. Old age itself is uneven. Many people die young, but some live into their 60s, 70s, or beyond. The claim that no medieval person reaches 40 confuses low average life expectancy at birth with the lifespan of those who survive childhood. The grandmother's presence is not impossible. It is precious. She contributes memory child care, light work skill, and a living map of kinship. This evening her knee will be warmed with cloth near the fire. Joan will fetch the stool before being asked. There will be no cure, only accommodation. Much care in every century is exactly this, noticing what hurts, rearranging the room and making the next hour easier. As sunset approaches, sound draws the household outward again. The church bell reaches the cottage before the church can be seen. Bells divide the day. Summon worship, warn of danger, mark death call, meetings, and give the community a shared pulse. Their meanings are learned in childhood until a pattern of ringing can alter the movement of an entire village. The parish church is likely the most substantial local building. Its stone, timber, glass, images, altar vessels, and books belong to a world of greater resources than the cottage. Villagers contribute to its maintenance through dues, gifts, labor, and local organization. The nave provides more than a place for mass. Announcements are made, agreements witnessed, people gathered, reputations observed, and the living arranged near the graves of their dead. Services are conducted largely in Latin, but incomprehension is not total emptiness. Familiar phrases, gestures, images, music, sermons, feast day stories, and repeated rituals communicate in layers. People may be devout, distracted, skeptical of a particular priest, fearful, hopeful, or all of these within a single week. Medieval faith is not a uniform expression worn by every villager. Sunday and feast days alter labor, though animals still require care, and emergencies ignore calendars. They also offer social visibility. A better cloak is taken from the chest, hair is arranged, young people notice one another, disputes continue beneath polite greetings. The church porch may serve as a place for contracts or public business because sacred and practical life share ground. Beyond the parish lies the market. On an authorized market day, the nearby town or larger village collects sellers, buyers, craftsmen, officials, travelers, and news. Alice may carry eggs, butter, thread, or ale. Will may look for an iron fitting, salt, a used tool, or information about wages. Prices reveal events before explanations arrive. Grain growing expensive tells its own story. Market measures are regulated in principle, cheated in practice, inspected, disputed, and defended. Coins must be recognized by type and weight. Bargaining requires knowledge. An ordinary villager who cannot read may still possess sharp, numerical judgment. Literacy is a specialized skill. Intelligence is not. Travelers bring fragments of the larger world, a royal marriage war across the sea, a bishop's dispute, a miracle at a shrine, trouble on a road, wages in a distant town. Stories distort as they move, but they expand the mental horizon. Some villagers travel for pilgrimage, seasonal work, military service, trade, legal business, or family ties. The medieval peasant is rooted, not necessarily immobile. The alehouse offers another centre of exchange. It may be a permanent establishment or a household selling a batch marked by a sign. People drink, talk, play games, arrange work, hear music, and quarrel. Authorities worry about disorder because disorder exists. Companionship exists for the same reason. A mug of ale can secure agreement more effectively than a formal speech. Mutual aid appears when a roof must be repaired, a harvest gathered before rain, a birth attended, a body buried, or an animal recovered. So does coercion. Villagers enforce norms with gossip, mockery, exclusion, court action, and sometimes violence. Community does not mean universal kindness. It means that lives are exposed to one another. Tonight a neighbour pauses at Alice's door to return the borrowed vessel. She stays long enough to report that the baby's fever has eased. Relief passes through the room, even though the child is not kin. Joan is sent with a small piece of bread for the mother. The gift is not grand charity. It is a thread placed into a net that may later hold this household. Outside, men return from the fields in groups that separate along the lane. A boy drives geese with a stick. Two women carry bundles of brushwood. Someone has begun a song and forgotten the second verse. Smoke settles low as the air cools. The wider medieval world is present here, without needing a castle on the horizon. It arrives through bells, tolls, coins, sermons, road dust, market prices, borrowed pots, and news spoken beside a well. The cottage is small, but no home is isolated from the systems that feed, tax, judge, comfort, and remember it. Will reaches the door with earth dried across his hose and a dark line of sweat beneath his cap. Thomas follows, carrying the repaired tool, though his arm has grown tired enough that it nearly drags. They pause outside to knock mud from their shoes. Dirt will enter anyway, but there is no reason to invite all of the field at once. Crossing the threshold reverses the morning. Cold bodies move toward warmth. Tools are set in known places. Cloaks are hung where smoke and heat can dry them. Alice looks up from the pot and reads the day in Will's posture before he speaks. The plough team worked, the ditch remains unfinished, and the reeve expects another half day. These facts join the household's evening calculations. Hands are washed with water from the vessel. Faces are wiped. Thomas discovers a small blister and tries to conceal it because he wants the dignity of being tired without the embarrassment of being hurt. His grandmother sees it, cleans it, and wraps it with a narrow strip of cloth. The strip has been washed and used before. Care is efficient, but not careless. Supper is the day's most complete gathering. The pottage has thickened. Onion, peas, grain herbs, and the single egg have become impossible to separate. Bread is divided. A little cheese appears. The family sits on stools, a bench, and the edge of the bed bowls held close. There is no formal dining room, yet the moment possesses order. The grandmother receives her bowl. The children wait. A brief prayer gives thanks for food whose fragility everyone understands. Conversation begins with work. How deep was the blocked ditch? Did the pig test the fence? How much grain remains? Will the weather hold? Then it expands. A neighbour's fever, a rumour about rent, a damaged bridge, and the missing verse of a song enter the room. Daily speech is the family's archive. Tomorrow's decisions are built from what is said tonight. Will tells Thomas where he handled the oxen well and where he stood too near the plough. Praise and warning arrive together. Alice asks Joan to name the herb she gathered. The child answers incorrectly, then correctly. Education is happening, though no slate is visible. Some village children may learn basic prayers, letters, or more through clergy schools, employers, or literate relatives, especially as opportunities vary. Much learning here remains oral and practical. Stories also teach. The grandmother recalls a winter when snow blocked the lane and a roof fell at the far end of the village. The tale has grown polished through repetition. It identifies families, explains an old nickname, warns against weak rafters, and gives Joan the pleasure of knowing what happens before Thomas does. Memory is entertainment with storage inside it. After the bowls are scraped, no one settles into complete leisure. Alice washes the cooking things with warm water and abrasive material suited to the vessel. Will shapes the replacement tool handle. Thomas twists cord. Joan winds thread. The grandmother tends her knee and watches the fire. Evening labour differs from field labour because it can be accompanied by talk, but tired hands still move. Light determines precision. The open fire gives an uneven glow. A rushlight may be lit, a peeled rush soaked in fat and held in a simple support. A tallow candle is another possibility, brighter according to quality, but still a resource to conserve. Beeswax burns better and smells more pleasant, but it belongs more commonly to churches and wealthier homes. There will be no room flooded with cheap, steady light. Shadows enlarge the roof beams. Smoke finds every face. Work needing careful sight is positioned close to flame, though closeness risks singed thread and aching eyes. When the rushlight gutters, conversation pauses automatically. Will adjusts it and the room returns in pieces. Music may enter without an instrument. Alice begins a familiar line and the others answer. Work songs, devotional songs, dance tunes, and remembered melodies travel without being written in this house. The exact tune will not survive for you to hear, but its function is clear. It coordinates, entertains, recalls, and fills darkness with something made by human breath. On another evening, a neighbour might visit with dice, a board game, gossip, or ale. On a feast day, the family might remain out longer. Tonight, fatigue keeps the world close. A dog barks twice and stops. The pig shifts in its shelter. Wind touches the repaired wall, but does not pass through the crack. Will unlocks the chest with Alice beside him. The coins are counted upon the lid. There are not enough to meet every possible need, because no sum ever protects against every future. They decide that the shoe must be patched again and the iron purchase delayed. Alice will brew when grain and time permit. The conversation is low, but the children hear more than adults imagine. The coins return to the purse. The documents remain folded. The better cloth lies undisturbed. When the chest closes, anxiety does not disappear, it becomes bounded. For the remainder of the evening there is only the room, the fire, and the people it holds. Joan grows drowsy while winding thread, her hands slow until the ball rolls across the floor. Thomas catches it with his foot and returns it without teasing. The grandmother's story loses its sharp edges. Outside, the village has withdrawn behind shutters and doors, each house becoming a separate pool of warmth beneath the same dark sky. The day's labour has travelled home in many forms: mud food news, pain fuel thread, and unfinished decisions. Now the hearth gathers those scattered pieces. Supper does more than satisfy hunger. It restores the household as a group after the fields have divided it. Preparing for sleep begins with the fire. Alice reduces it to a safer bed of embers, arranging fuel so that some heat may remain, without sending lively sparks toward the thatch. A vessel of water stands nearby. The door bar is checked. Shutters close against wind and wandering eyes. The cottage becomes darker, smaller, and more secure. The family removes or loosens outer garments according to warmth, custom, and privacy. Linen worn near the skin may remain. Damp clothing is placed where it can dry without scorching. Shoes rest near the door, not because the arrangement is quaint, but because mud has limits even here. The principal bed is a frame or built structure raised above the cold earth. Its mattress is a sack filled with straw, chaff, wool, feathers in richer circumstances, or a combination shaped by means. Straw compresses and must be replaced. A rope support can sag and require tightening. Bedding may include linen sheets, wool blankets, coverlets, furs for wealthier households, and whatever textiles the family has accumulated. Not everyone receives a separate bed. Will and Alice share. Children may sleep together on a smaller pallet trundle bench or bedding arranged on the floor. The grandmother's place is chosen for accessibility and warmth. Servants or guests, when present, make the geometry more complicated. Sharing a bed provides heat as well as saving space and material. Privacy again depends on convention. People look away, lower their voices, or wait their turn. A curtain, if owned, offers a modest boundary. Human beings have always been capable of creating private meaning inside shared rooms. Walls help, but behavior does much of the work. Before anyone lies down, bedding is shaken and inspected. Fleas, lice, bedbugs, mice, and rats all compete for the resources of the house. Cats and dogs may help with rodents, though they bring parasites of their own. Herbs such as lavender, tansy, mint, or others may be scattered for scent or expected protection. Sun and fresh air are useful when weather permits. None of these methods achieves the sealed cleanliness of a modern home. The family's response is not cheerful surrender. A biting insect at midnight is crushed with the same irritation it would provoke now. Straw is changed, cloth is boiled or washed when possible, cracks are examined, sleeping places are moved or aired. The difference lies in the limits of control, not in a different definition of annoyance. Smoke lingers above the beds. Its long-term effects are not measured, but eyes sting and lungs suffer. A chimney, where present in some houses and increasingly adopted across periods and regions, can transform the interior. This cottage still relies on smoke finding its way through roof material openings and chance. By night the fire is lower, yet its smell has entered hair clothing blankets and wood. The last rushlight is extinguished. Darkness is not the softened darkness of a modern room with light beneath the door. It is nearly complete. Only the embers pulse red. Vision withdraws, and sound becomes the map. Breathing straw, shifting wind along the eaves, an animal outside, a distant voice, the creak of timber cooling. Night can be dangerous. Fire, theft, sickness, and storm do not keep daylight hours. Travelers risk bad roads and uncertain lodging. Villages may have watches or communal responses under particular conditions, and towns regulate gates and curfews. Here the barred door, barking dogs, neighbours, and familiarity with every normal sound provide the first defence. The family may wake during the night. A child needs the chamber pot. Someone checks the fire. Pain interrupts the grandmother. Alice hears rain and remembers the roof patch. Historical references sometimes describe a first sleep and a later second sleep, with a waking interval between, but it is unsafe to impose one universal pattern on every medieval person. Sleep follows labor season, age, health, light, and household disturbance as much as a single cultural rule. The chamber pot avoids an outdoor journey in darkness, though it must be emptied. In other circumstances, a privy, midden, or designated place serves. Sanitation arrangements vary widely and often offend modern senses. They are nonetheless arrangements, attempts to manage bodies within material limits. Prayer may be the final deliberate act. The family knows spoken forms, even if no one can read a prayer book. Alice murmurs words for protection. Will names the dead briefly in his thoughts. Joan's prayer dissolves into sleep before reaching its proper end. Faith becomes quietest here when there is no congregation to observe it. Thomas is still awake. His blister touches the cloth. His shoulders remember the plough. Through the roof he cannot see stars, but he knows their light is above the thatch. Tomorrow he will rise when called, and try again to stand where will showed him. A skill is being built in his body while sleep repairs what work has tired. The house makes its own nighttime weather. The space near the embers is warmest, the outer wall is cold, breath gathers in blankets. On severe winter nights, every textile is pulled close and bodies become sources of heat. In summer, shutters may be opened as safety allows, and insects replace cold as the enemy of rest. Beyond the cottage, the village is not entirely silent. An infant cries and is soothed. A watchful dog answers another. Water moves at the well. An owl hunts above the field strips. The church tower is a darker shape. Within darkness, its bell waiting for the hour, a death, a warning or dawn. No one inside knows that centuries later strangers will romanticize this night as simpler. Simplicity is not the word they would choose. The household carries rent, weather, illness, repair, hunger, and memory into bed, yet it also carries familiarity. Each sleeper knows the breathing nearby, the position of the door, the smell of the hearth, and the exact sound of rain upon this roof. Gradually, even those sounds become distant. Will's hands unclench. Alice stops revising tomorrow. The grandmother finds a position her knee accepts. Thomas turns once. Joan sleeps with the useless, beautiful stone still hidden in her garment pocket. The embers dim from orange to a deeper red. The house is no longer a workplace, kitchen, storehouse, nursery, sick room, and meeting place all at once. For a few hours it is simply a shelter holding sleeping bodies against the cold. While the family sleeps, you can allow the single day to widen. The cottage remains in its place as weeks and seasons move around it. Morning after morning the door opens. Night after night the bar falls into its brackets. The same room changes without travelling anywhere. In spring, boots bring mud across the threshold. Seed leaves the storage sacks and enters the fields, turning food in hand into faith beneath the soil. The garden fence is repaired again. Lambs call from nearby pasture. Alice watches the grain reserves sink while green shoots remain too young to eat. Rain sounds welcome until there is too much of it. In summer, light enters early and lingers late. The family sleeps fewer hours when work presses. Clothing grows damp with sweat rather than rain. The cottage door remains open when safety and weather permit, and the hearth may be kept smaller, though cooking still requires flame. Flies gather, herbs dry beneath the roof. Joan's bare feet harden along familiar paths. At harvest, the house seems almost abandoned during daylight. Everyone who can help is outside. When they return, chaff clings to hair and cuffs. Better food may be shared. New grain arrives first in sheaves, then after threshing and winnowing in forms the household can store. The chest sacks, lofted spaces and containers grow fuller. Relief is visible in the way bread is cut Autumn brings smoke of another kind, hedges are cut carefully, fruit collected, fuel gathered, animals assessed, and meat preserved where possible. Thatch is checked before storms, the house tightens itself for winter. Every object that will be needed in darkness is repaired while there is still light enough to see it. Then winter returns. The family occupies a smaller circle around the fire. Breath is visible near the wall. Work moves indoors, spinning, mending, carving, planning, telling. Roads worsen, stores decline. The cottage proves whether summer labor was sufficient and whether luck has remained kind. Across these seasons, the house changes with the family. Thomas grows strong enough to guide the plough more confidently. Joan's thread becomes thinner and more even. The grandmother tells the same stories until one winter she does not. A new child may enter the bed by the wall, a neighbor may come to live here through marriage, service, need, or inheritance. The word household describes a group, but the group is always in motion. The building changes too. A post is replaced. New daub covers Joan's old handprint. Thatch from another harvest lies over thatch laid by someone now buried in the churchyard. A better pot is bought after a good year. A blanket is cut down after a death. The chest survives long enough to hold possessions belonging to people its maker never met. This is why the peasant home is more than a poor version of a modern one. It is not organized around private rooms, abundant objects, steady temperature, instant water, or purchased convenience. It is organized around transformations. Grain becomes bread, wood becomes heat, fleece becomes clothing, manure becomes fertility, memory becomes instruction, labor becomes survival, though never with certainty. Its limits are severe. Smoke damages lungs, cold enters, parasites bite. Women bear exhausting burdens of production and care. Children work young. Illness can overwhelm every remedy. Authority claims, rent service, tithe, fines, and obedience. Hunger waits behind failed weather. Nothing about this should be softened into a charming costume. But hardship is not the only truth. The cottage contains competence. Its inhabitants understand soils, animals, fibers, fuel, food, weather, bodies, neighbors, and obligations with a precision earned through consequence. They improvise, calculate, laugh, resent, pray, bargain, teach, repair, and love. Their lives are constrained, not empty. When historians search for such people, the evidence often arrives in fragments. A court roll names a fine, an excavation reveals a post hole, a potsherd burned grain animal bone, or the line of a wall. An account lists rent. A will records a bed chest, cow spoon, or cloak. No single fragment recreates the room. Together, they allow its outline to return. Within that outline, imagination must walk carefully. We cannot know every word Alice says, the shape of Joan's stone, or whether Will's knee also aches. These belong to the story that has carried us through the evidence. Yet the work surrounding them is real. Fires had to be tended, water carried, clothing mended, grain measured, children taught, debts counted, and doors barred at night. The great events of the Middle Ages depend upon these unrecorded acts. Armies require grain. Towns require food and fibre, lords require rent, churches require tithes, markets require goods. Every monument rises above thousands of households whose labour rarely appears on the stone. The castle dominates the horizon, but the cottage supports the world beneath it. Now the night deepens. Rain begins lightly touching the thatch with a soft, scattered tapping. Alice hears it somewhere within sleep, but does not wake. The repaired roof holds. Water follows the slope and falls beyond the wall. Inside, the embers retain one small point of light. The room contains almost nothing that a modern advertisement would call comfort. There is no glass brightening the window, no clock glowing beside the bed, no pipe bringing clean water, no switch commanding heat. Yet comfort has been made here from what the household can control. Dry straw, shared blankets, a barred door, food enough for morning, and the sound of familiar breathing. For tonight the rent is not being collected. The ditch can wait. No animal has broken the fence. No spark has reached the thatch. No fever burns. The household has been granted an ordinary night, and ordinary safety is a form of wealth. Soon the cock will stir. The bell will cross the fields. Alice will uncover the embers and search for heat. Will listen to the weather. Thomas will remember the plough. Joan will find the stone in her pocket and decide for reasons known only to her to keep it another day. But not yet. For now the village rests beneath a sky it cannot measure completely, and seasons it cannot command. The fields lie dark in their long ridges. The well holds the reflection of no one. Smoke has thinned above the roofs. Behind one wall of timber, straw, clay, and patient repair, a family sleeps. And you can leave them there inside their crowded, fragile, capable home while the rain passes gently over the medieval night.